James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting February the 24th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. Over the course of the week, I got a lot of interest in Gypsy Witch cards, so that's going to be the system I'm going to be working with. Specifically, I'm working with my favorite set of Gypsy Witch cards, and if you are no stranger to this space and you already know what the deck is, it's the vintage Gypsy Witch fortune-telling oracle cards. They are by Lynn Boyle, and as always, I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at what the Gypsy Witch cards want to share with us about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my intention for these weekly general readings, and that is for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice to come through the cards that is going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. I'm feeling that'll be good, and now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And fan the cards out. And I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. This week I'm returning to a line of 5. So I have the 5 cards selected. Now I'm going to remove the remainder of the deck and put that to one side. Now I'm just going to quickly count back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm going to lay the cards out from left to right. So when I work with Gypsy Witch cards, I read them similar to Lenormand. So I like to start with the card in the middle. For me, the middle card always represents the central issue or what we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead. And taking a look at the card, we have the roads with the inset of the Ace of Clubs, because I always read the playing card inserts when I work with the Gypsy Witch cards as well. So starting with the symbol, the roads can be talking about having to make a choice. My keywords for the roads is choices, options, alternatives. For me, this card can turn up when we're needing to make a choice and we're wanting to choose the best course going forward. So there's something about focusing on our choices, and when we're focusing on our choices and decisions, it's about looking at the options and alternative within those choices and decisions, right? And we're doing it with the intention of wanting to move in the best direction or take the best path or the best avenue or the best route. I'm playing on all the words for me that are synonymous with the word road, right? So there is that. Now, it could also be going with the idea that I tend to look at the symbolism as potentially being somewhat literal. Then this card could suggest going with the idea about roads, about our path. So there may be something about focusing on our path. So some people may be focusing on their path and with the underlying question or motivation about where they are going, right? So there's putting some energy into that. What I love about the image is that there's one side of the road that's connected to this card and the other side of the road is connected to this card. So this is serving as a connector card between these two cards possibly. So we'll take a look at that to see what they may want to contribute to this state of decision, being at a fork in the road, needing to make the best choice about the course going forward, those kinds of things. right? And then for some people going with the more literal aspect, if you are traveling, then it's about, being on the road, so to speak, right? So now let's take a look at the Ace of Clubs, the playing card insert. For me, the Ace of Clubs can talk about new work or a new job or the potential for new work or a new job or business, because I read the suit of clubs as anything having to do with work and business. And aces always represent something new or something starting or the potential for something. So just pairing all of that up, here we have the start of new work or the start of a new job or the potential for new work or new business if you are business minded. Another thing with the Ace of Clubs, going more with the travel and the being on the road aspect, for me, this card can represent legal paperwork and documentation. So there may be something having to do with possibly, a travel visa, or some sort of a paperwork may be connected to being on the road. So those are some, ideas about the roads and the Ace of Clubs. And so now let's take a look at the surrounding cards because they're going to offer more information. So now taking a look at the card on the far left, opening the line up, we have the cat with the insert of the Eight of Hearts. So for me, when the cat comes up, my first go-to meaning is that it can represent, independence. I tend to look at cats as independent beings or creatures, right? More so than dogs. And so I have always been a dog lover and I've always had dogs in my life. But the thing about cats is they strike me as being very independent. So there's something about an independent streak. That's the words that are coming to me in my mind. And so that would make sense with the idea about choosing the best course going forward or being at a fork in the road and needing to make some choices or decisions. Some of those choices and decisions may be about where do we go from here on our own. That's the idea of playing on the idea of independence. It's making me feel like maybe the path going forward or the road that we're traveling on, to some degree, it may be an independent journey, meaning like solo. So there is that with the cat. Now, it could also be something having to do with cats in the literal sense. And I'm just going to say that is validation for me. Right now, I am house sitting for a couple and they have a cat. So I am also cat sitting. So that's very interesting that would show up at the beginning of the line. And that's just a way that I would personalize the reading for me. And just as I do it for me, I encourage all of you to personalize the readings for yourself, right? So just take into account the cat could mean something literal to you if you are either a cat lover or a cat owner, or if you're like me and you are actually cat sitting right now, right? So there's that. And I will go further. Now let's move to the Eight of Hearts, the playing card insert. One of my meanings for the Eight of Hearts is a very good friend, right? So I am actually house sitting and cat sitting for a very good friend, right? So there is that. Now, the Eight of Hearts in that regard could also be something having to do with a very good friend, and there's something having to do with maybe a relationship. I'm looking that there's two cats on the card, and it could be maybe a very good friend is wanting to assert to some degree his or her independence, right? Especially if we connect that to the middle card, right? So a very good friend may be choosing the path going forward that's in his or her best and highest good, right? So there is that. If I actually compare, or not compare, but combine the two is what I meant to say, along with the middle card. Now, another aspect going with the idea here about the Eight of Hearts representing a very good friend and possible friendship, then the Eight of Hearts is a card that represents faith and trust and mutual admiration, right? So going with that, if there is something having to do with a friendship, people identify with that or resonate with that this week, then there may be something having to do with faith and trust, in either the friend or the friendship or even your role in the friendship, right? But it's one where there is a great deal of mutual admiration. Now, another aspect of the Eight of Hearts for me is that this is one of the cards for me that can represent justice. So there may be something about wanting to do something right within that relationship or that friendship, right? Wanting to do the right thing or seeing justice done, and I'm doing justice in finger quotes. Justice is all about the truth and doing the right thing, in my opinion. So there may be something having to do with that as well. Now, Another aspect of the Eight of Hearts for me, and this is more of a spiritual leaning, is that this card can represent one's guardian angel. So if you happen to be an angel person, then the idea here is that maybe this is a week for you, especially if you're at a fork in the road or you're wanting to choose the best path going forward, if I can get the words out. And if you're an angel person, you may want to consider working with your guardian angels to give you some insight into that. I think the idea here with the Eight of Hearts, more likely than not, if we identify this as choosing the best course or the best path going forward, then there's something about wanting it to feel right, right? Going with the idea that the Eight of Hearts is all about justice. You know, I keep seeing in my mind the idea about doing the right thing. So there's a feeling of wanting it to feel right. So that's how I would look at the Eight of Hearts. So now let's move on to the card in the middle between the cat and the roads. And here we have the house card. So when I use this deck and I do readings with it in this space, this card turns up quite a bit. So very interesting. Again, I could make the personal connection here between the cat and the house because I already just said I was cat sitting, and so I also said I was house sitting. So there's something about that, right? For me personally. I also notice that we have two cards from the suit of hearts. So the suit of hearts can represent feelings, emotions, relationships, or the ability to relate to other people, right? So all those things, but it can also represent domestic affairs. And so that's a nice way to kind of bring the house into the picture here. No pun intended. The house can represent a house. So this could be focusing on our home lives, our personal lives, right? So this idea about making choices or decisions could have to do with something on the home front, right? So again, this could be one's home life. It could actually be a home, right? Or real estate or property. All those things I consider to be keywords with the house. And if it's not those things, then it could just be a family member, right? So there may be something about a relationship where we're asserting our sense of independence. And going back to the Eight of Hearts, it could be about faith and trust in a family member, right? And I'm going to even add more to that because the Six of Hearts, the playing card insert, for me can represent a male relative or a male friend, right? So we didn't have gender with the Eight of Hearts. Now we have gender, right? So this could be a very good friend who's male or faith and trust in a male relative, right? And so I'm going to add to that because what I'm seeing in the cards right now, what's coming to me is that there may be faith and trust in either a male friend or a male relative to do the right thing, right? So there may be something about the relationship, and we are working on repairing that to some degree. Justice, right? Wanting to do the right thing or see that the right thing is done. It makes me feel like I want to feel better about the relationship than maybe I do right now. And then going with the idea about feeling better with the Eight of Hearts, then the house is all about comfort, like being comfortable, right? So there may be about a decision that needs to be made, and the house for me would say, I want to feel comfortable with the decision that I make, right? If I go with the order of the cards. So this would be comfort with the decision being made and down the road, right? So that's how I would look at the Six of Hearts and the house card. And I already made the distinction that this card was like a connector between these two cards. So we have the house on one side as possible connection here to the choice or the decision or being at a fork in the road, metaphorically speaking. So let's see what's on the other side. And here we have the Tower with the 10 of clubs. Very interesting. Okay, so we have something here about independence again, because for me, one of the meanings of the Tower is isolation, being single, being alone. So there's something about needing to do something on one's own. I'm hearing the duet between Michael McDonald and Patti LaBelle, On My Own, in my head. So there's something about wanting to do something on one's own, right? Now, there could also be something having to do with a choice between family or being comfortable, right? So between family and then between being on one's own, or something having to do with the law or something legal. The tower for me represents all those things. It could represent the law, it could represent some sort of rule, policy, some sort of regulation, right? So there's something about this. It could also be something having to do between family and career, because for me, the tower can represent elevation of status, and that would make sense with the Ace of Clubs talking about new work or the potential for new work or a new job or new business. And then that would bring the 10 of Clubs, the playing card insert, into that. Because one of the meanings that I have for the 10 of Clubs is a small business, right? So now let's even go with that. So if I go with this maybe being more of a business kind of thing, then the house, just like the 10 of Clubs, can also represent small business. I tend to look at this as small retail establishments, maybe a small family-owned business, you know, that kind of thing. Even a boutique kind of business, right? And if the choice or decision or about going forward could be how can we expand on that? Because the tower represents things like companies, corporations, firms. You know, so I'm seeing something here about having to, you know, maybe expand or taking the business to new heights, right? Going with the idea that the tower can represent a tall building. And then that would make sense going with the idea that we're moving from an ace to the 10 of the same suit. So we have here the beginning and the end, because the 10 is the last number card in the suit before we go to the jacks, the queens, and the kings, right? So there's something about that. And then this card would also mark the idea of like some sort of transition, right? Now, if this is travel in the metaphorical sense, you know, choosing the best path going forward, then the clubs can represent progress being made. And here with the 10 of clubs, there's a lot of progress being made. And so that keys into another aspect of the 10 of clubs for me. This is a travel card. And so it could represent, again, we have two cards that are suggesting travel if it's not in the literal sense and maybe in the more metaphorical sense. But with the idea of like, you know, down the road seeing a lot of progress being made. But it could also be, like I said, business travel, right? And so somebody is wanting to maybe make some choices or decisions about the element of travel, especially for business, right? But I find it very interesting here that we have a couple of cards that are talking about doing something independently or in isolation or on one's own. So there's something about that. So there could be, for someone, wanting to move away from a family dynamic to some degree. So I'm seeing all of that. So now let's take a look at the last card and rounding the reading out. And here we have the order card and the Jack of Clubs. So the first thing that I notice is that we have 3 cards from the suit of clubs. So again, ruling majority is we have something here that represents work, it represents business. Now, it could also be, if it's not work and business in the literal sense, something that we are working on and then it requires a great deal of effort, and that would be the 10 of clubs, right? Putting in a lot of work, right, with that. And here's the thing, especially if we want to be successful with it, because the order, I'm looking at the image and it's a medal, right? So we only get a medal for something that we have achieved, something that we have accomplished, right? So I tend to look at this as achievement, accomplishment, and some sort of success. Now, in some circles, if you work with Lenormand and you want to carry that over into your work with Gypsy Witch cards, some people look at this as a cross, because you could take into account that the medal looks like a cross. So some people apply the meanings of the cross from Lenormand to this card. And if we do that, then the cross can represent burdens, it could represent difficulties, it could represent a situation that is critical or necessary. Those are all my keywords for cross. And with that, if we go with the business sense or the job sense, cross can also represent new duties and new responsibilities, right? So there may be something with someone's working life that's changing, right? And that would make sense here with the idea of like this is about a promotion possibly. And then with that, there's going to be some sort of new duties and new responsibilities, right? And so it's just a matter of navigating going back to the 10 of clubs being about travel and travel over water, right? That's another meaning of it. And so that's the idea where I got the word navigating from. Navigating through maybe the more difficult or challenging aspects of those changes. Now, the Jack of Clubs as the insert is a card that talks about news or messages, because all jacks for me represent news or messages in one regard. So there's something about news or messages, and it could be about work or business, or it could be about news about some progress that's been made. Now, one of the other meanings for me with the Jack of Clubs, I'm being reminded, is that it can represent an employee. So again, we have something about somebody's job status changing possibly, or moving into a new job or new work where there's going to be a lot of work, or a lot of responsibility, and having to navigate that, especially if there's a change in status, like a promotion or moving into leadership, because this could be somebody at the top, right? Or, an office. I'm looking at the image and it reminds me of the expression of having an office with a view, because I'm looking at the window on the tower, right? And it could be moving away from working with other people, like maybe in a department, and moving into management or upper level management. I'm seeing that as a possibility if I keep that all in the business aspect, right? There could also be, again, if we're talking about maybe something on a more personal level with family, then there may be about needing to work through issues about faith and trust, especially with a male family member. And then we could put the Jack of Clubs back into that, because jacks can represent a person of either gender. And this would be a younger person, right? So it could be maybe there's a situation in a family with a younger family member who, male, by the way, who wants to assert some kind of independence, wanting to do something on his own, right? And it's about making choices or decisions that are in alignment with that. So that is what I'm seeing in the cards this week. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.